Okay, so that's 2 o'clock, folks, so we will get started. Welcome to this seminar, which is titled Learner-centred Approaches to Improving Attendance and Engagement, and we're really delighted that you've joined us this afternoon. Just a couple of housekeeping matters before we get started. A reminder to keep your mic and your camera off if you're not speaking. To please make use of the chat pane. Jan and Shona and I would be absolutely delighted if you engage with us and use the chat pane. If you lose connection for any reason, please don't panic and just rejoin and you'll come straight back into the room. And finally, if you'd like to tweet about the seminar this afternoon or any aspect of SLF, use the hashtag SLF as a tweet. So let's get started. So we really hope that the next 45 minutes provide you with some inspiration and ideas in tackling attendance and engagement. I'm Amanda Hamilton, and I'm an attainment advisor with Education Scotland, and I'm joined this afternoon by Jan Adair, and Jan is an improvement advisor with the Children and Young People's Improvement Collaborative. And I'm also joined by Shona Moffat, and Shona is a school and family development worker in Longhall Primary in Dundee, and it's great to have them with us. So as I say, throughout the session this afternoon, please feel free to make use of the chat pane to post questions or any comments you might have. So the aims of this seminar are to consider the following. So the challenge. So what do we know? Sorry, we've got a wee bit of, if somebody's maybe, can you maybe just check that mics are off, folks? Thanks very much. So the challenge, what do we know about the challenge of improving attendance and engagement? We're going to give consideration to the low-hanging fruit, the universal approaches that we can take to addressing our challenge. We're going to look at a method of finding solutions, and Jan is going to provide an overview of the quality improvement journey and how we can use this to implement a child-centred approach. And finally, a consideration of the high-hanging fruit, where situations are more complex and require a bespoke approach. And Shona will tell us about the work that she's been leading in Dundee. So today we're making an assumption that you've joined us because improving attendance and engagement is already a priority in your school or setting, and that this is a challenge which you have either been working on for some time or are beginning work on. We recognise that attendance and engagement are two different issues, and that good attendance does not always equal an effective level of engagement. However, we hope that the processes we share here today could be used either attendance or engagement as a focus. So it's well understood that in schools and settings that attendance matters and that every day counts. But just for a minute, I'd like you to consider what the tolerance level is in your school or setting. So are we concerned when our average attendance drops below 95%? Or 85%, or even lower? And what about the tolerance levels for individual pupils? At what point do we think that non-attendance begins to have an impact? So we know from local and national data and from reports from schools that COVID-19 and subsequent periods of home learning have had a significant impact on levels of attendance. If you get Schools and settings also report a direct correlation with increasing numbers of children and young people experiencing poor mental health. And where COVID absence has accounted for a percentage of non-attendance, the non-COVID absences have continued to grow and to be a bigger factor in declining levels of attendance. So I wonder if we could pause there just for a wee second and ask for your engagement to post in the chat pane the changes that you have seen in our children and young people since the pandemic, particularly in relation to attendance and engagement. And I'll ask that Jan and Shona just monitor that, and we can maybe pick that up just in a minute or two. We'll give folks just a chance to post any changes that you have seen in our children and young people since the pandemic, particularly in relation to attendance and engagement. So just while you're doing that, so this concerns all of us as we know that a combination of poor attendance at school and poor mental health sets children and young people on a trajectory of poorer outcomes in attainment, in wider achievement, in physical and mental health, and in overall life chances. We also know that this is particularly true for our most disadvantaged children and young people. So I just saw something pop up there, Jan or Shona. Do you want to maybe make a comment about anything that's come in? Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, so Mrs. Farley in their school, they've seen a decline in attendance, particularly from S4 secondary pupils, which I'm thinking is extremely worrying, but particularly when they're going to be sitting exams and things. That's more people starting to put in as well. So we've got Mrs. Davidson's a PT for flex education for the authority, and adapted timetables and non-attendance is significant and a huge concern. So I think there's also a bit of a belief that it's okay to work from home instead of coming into school. Somebody else has posted. And we're seeing lower resilience among young people and less belief that their problems can be overcome. And again, lots of sort of difficulties with anxiety and things as well as what's coming through, Amanda.
Thank you, Jan, and thanks, folks, for your engagement. And I would imagine that as you read those comments that they are not unfamiliar to you, and that they're common issues that you're seeing in your own schools and setting. Thanks so much. We'll come back to some of these comments, folks. Thank you so much. The Attendance Works in Healthy Schools campaign had a quote recently that said, "Poor attendance is among the first and best warning signs that a student has missed the on-ramp to success." And I think that's a really helpful way to think about it. So what can we do? So that's the challenge. What can we do about it? So it might be helpful in planning an approach to think about it in two categories, low and high hanging fruit. So the low-hanging fruit might include a review of your school or setting's universal systems, culture and practice. And the aim of this would be to provide consistent and effective approaches which would improve attendance for the majority of children and young people. However, the high-hanging fruit are the more complex situations which require a child-centred and solution-focused approach, and they will likely require more resource and a longer period of time to improve attendance. So we believe that there are three cogs which underpin improvement in this area: culture, systems and practice. And these were first introduced through GIRFIC in 2014 and are relevant today in taking a holistic approach to supporting the well-being of children and young people. So culture consists of the prevailing values, both within our service and amongst the individuals that work within that service, and which underpin the quality of our relationships and the approaches that we take. Our systems underpin the key tasks of an organisation, our structures, policies, procedures and protocols, and all the processes which support how we plan and deliver for children and families. And the practice is the repertoire we have in working with children and families and with other agencies and practitioners. So just out of interest, as a very initial thought, if you had to begin a review in your school in regards to attendance and engagement, which of those three cogs do you think you would start on? Just pop that into the chat pane just for a second, just out of interest. Let's see what the spread might look like. So do you think your review would need to begin with your culture, with your systems, or with your practice? There's no right or wrong answer here. It's purely what you think would be right for your setting or school.
Well, a couple of cultures coming in so far, Amanda. Culture without a doubt from somebody.
A lot of cultures coming through.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Mrs. Finlayson, again, a good point, culture for me, but I feel we would have to wait for systems. So there's maybe something about processes needs to be addressed before you can focus in on culture.
Yeah.
Someone there said the GIRFIC refresh is all about relationships first.
Yeah. Yeah. Some great points being made. I can see them popping up on my screen there. That looks like a really good point that was made there about where people start.
Yeah.
What does that, can somebody read that for me, Jan or Shona?
Yeah, so it's people tend to start with systems, but culture is probably the most important.
Yeah, so, and that's probably the point I was going to go on to make. So when thinking about implementing a change, it's worth considering the blend of these elements and the order by which you prioritise them. So for example, if you were introducing nurturing approaches, this requires a culture change, which then leads to changes in practice, and that informs the development of systems and policies like a relationship policy. And often going straight to the policy wouldn't lead to sustained change. So important to think about the order in which you do that review and the blend of approach you take. So the following 3 slides are going to summarise the themes, under these themes, the research on improvement in attendance and engagement. And apologies for the amount of text on these slides. I'm not going to read it all, you'll be pleased to know. So in terms of culture, the impact of positive school, classroom and community culture in improving attendance is evident in research in this area, and your comments have just completely reflected that. You understand the importance of that. So you might, in a review in this area for your school or setting, you might ask, for instance, do we have a relentless leadership commitment at all levels to improving well-being and ensuring equity and inclusion? Do we prioritise feelings of safety and belonging? Do we seek to understand why a child or young person does not want to attend or engage? And do we consistently model compassionate and flexible relationships? And these, as I say, are the key findings from the research under the theme of culture. And in terms of systems, a review of systems might include asking, do we have rigorous tracking and monitoring which results in actionable data, so data that we can take action on? Do we track the reasons for absence, establishing why a young person is not in school and not just that they are absent? Is our policy and procedures for attendance fit for purpose? And is it implemented consistently by all team members? And whose responsibility is it to track, monitor and act on attendance data? And then finally, our practices, so a review of practices might include asking, do we have a long-term strategy for supporting attendance? Do we regularly update or review our practices? Do our practices reflect the views of children and young people? Practice, we know from the research, practice that was developed through listening to the views, concerns and aspirations of a young person had significantly greater lasting impact. And these approaches prioritise the social and emotional well-being of the young person in the first instance as a route to securing increased attendance and engagement in learning. And this is the point at which I will hand over to Jan, who will describe a process that would assist us in doing just that. And we could perhaps come back to some of the comments later on if there's time. Thank you, Jan.
Thanks, Amanda. So if you're looking to improve attendance in schools, this is the quality improvement journey we would be encouraging you to go through. It's often described as a route map for improvement. Now, we don't have time to go through all the stages today in detail, so I will give you just a brief overview, and then I'm going to post a link at the end of the session to the NHS Quality Improvement Zone, where you'll find out lots of information about each stage of the journey, and there's lots of tools and techniques that can support improvement at different stages of the journey too. So you'll see that the first step is about creating the conditions for change. So that's about ensuring that you've got the right team, that you've got a common purpose, and that actually you've got enough time to actually dedicate the resource to the improvement work. The next stage is then about understanding systems. So that's really about how are our people, how are our processes, how are they all currently working, and how do we know? And another question you might want to ask at this stage is, where do we have issues, or where do we have things that aren't working, and what is it that we really want to understand a little bit better? Then the next step is develop an aim and change theory. And thinking about an aim and a change theory, we really need to know how we're going to achieve our aim, and everybody that's involved needs to be clear about that too. And it also needs to be measurable. So we need to be able to measure our aim so that we know whether we're on track to achieving it or not. And then we're ready for testing. So this is about identifying specific change ideas. It's about making predictions. It's about identifying measures, studying results and refining. Now, I would suggest that the reason sometimes why improvement projects fail is because a lot of improvement projects start here, so we miss out the first 3 steps. So it's really important that we do the first 3 steps before we start to implement change. And then the last 2 stages are about implementation and spread. So how do we make sure that what we've learned sticks in our own context, and then how do we spread it to other contexts? And you'll see that underpinning all the journey is effective leadership and teamwork, it's effective project management and communication, and it's effective measurement. So that all underpins the improvement journey. Amanda, on to the next slide for me, please. So for now, I'm going to focus in on this part of the journey, this bit about understanding our current system. So as I said, this is about how our people and our processes are currently working, and how do we know? And where do we have issues or failures, and what is it that we want to understand better? And on to the next slide, it's really about understanding our data. So these are some questions that you might want to start with. I'll just pause and let you have a read. Okay, so we need to understand what our data is telling us, and we need to identify any gaps in our knowledge that we may have. So we might have some gaps in being able to answer these questions. It's really important that we start to drill into that a little bit more. And on to the next slide, Amanda, I'm going to share, there's a number of quality improvement tools that can help at this stage. So these are some of my favourites. You've maybe heard of some of them or used some of them in improvement work. But they enable us to ensure that we're targeting our improvement efforts on aspects of our system or aspects of our work that will deliver the greatest impact. So they help us to uncover root causes, and they also help us to see the wood in amongst the trees in terms of that visual that's there. So we're going to give you examples of 2 of the tools today. So we're going to share with you the Pareto and the fishbone, but again, information about all the tools are on the quality improvement zone that I'll post a link to later. So Pareto analysis, it's a way of prioritising improvement efforts, and that what we're going to do is start with the main root cause of failure in the system. So it's the main reason why pupils aren't attending school, for example. So if you're thinking about everybody in your system, why are our pupils not attending? And the principle was based on a piece of work by a man called Vilfredo Pareto, and he was an Italian sociologist, economist from the 1800s. And what he discovered was that 80% of Italy's wealth was owned by 20% of the people. And he then began to explore this 80-20 rule further, and he found lots of examples where this was the case. Now, recently, one of the ones that I like to share, it was something that I heard on the radio, was that women in particular wear 20% of their clothes 80% of the time. So again, I'll pause and ask if this resonates with you. You can make me feel better by typing into chat if it does, because it definitely resonated with me. Although recently it's because I think I can't fit into 80% of my clothes due to the weight I've put on, but that's another story. But again, just thinking about this 80-20 rule, you'll probably see it in lots of examples. So anyway, basically the principle has evolved, and it's now used in many quality improvement projects. And when applied to quality improvement, our theory is if we put our effort into the top 20% of the issues that we have, or the top 20% of failures in our system, we're going to get 80% improvement. So the principle is encouraging us not to try to solve everything at once. And I'm just going to show you what one looks like. Now, this isn't an education example. This is one that was done for staff who were trying to improve writing. So rather than trying to solve everything that's along the bottom here, all the things that the children weren't doing, we were going to hone in on the thing that the majority of the children couldn't do. So the teacher had assessed pieces of writing, identified what was missing, what the pupils weren't doing. And for us, in this example, the main cause that children weren't attaining in writing was due to a lack of punctuation and length. So as the principle suggests, we need to address and concentrate on the few main causes in order to get the biggest gains. So the class teacher therefore focused only on punctuation before she addressed any of the other issues. And what they found was that by focusing in on the first few main issues, everything else started to improve anyway. The next example is an example about engagement. So this Pareto demonstrates the root causes for children. It was across 4 schools who were unable to engage in learning during the first lockdown due to COVID. So again, you'll see in this example, the biggest issues were parents' capacity and time. It was complex family life, and it was limited IT. So in order to have got the biggest improvement, these schools were going to have to focus on the parents' capacity, the limited IT, and thinking about family life. Now, some of that might have been out with their control, but limited IT probably wasn't something that was out with their control, so that's where they tended to start. The next one is an example with attendance. So a Pareto, it can also help you to segment your population. So in this chart, this was the number of pupils who had an attendance with less than 80%. And what the school identified was that it was S3s in particular. So rather than trying to solve attendance for everybody, they were going to focus in on S3. And they were going to try different change ideas for S3 to see if they work or not. And then the idea would be then you would spread it to the other stages. Other schools have issued surveys to pupils asking why they weren't attending, and then charted the reasons on a Pareto. So in one example, I know it was anxiety and it was the behaviours of others that were the top 2 issues. And I think that's what came through the chat, that we've got lots of pupils with anxiety issues. So again, you can find out information and you can lay it along in a Pareto. So again, just going to pause for a few seconds to digest what you've heard about this tool and whether you think it might be useful or not. So you can have a think, and again, pop into chat if you can think of any way where you might be able to use this tool in either attendance or even other projects that you're thinking about.
I can vouch for the fact that it's often a real light bulb moment when you organise and categorise in that way, and you realise that actually there are some areas where you can have greatest impact if you focus on them.
Thanks, Amanda.
Mrs. Gallagher is saying it's really interesting. We'd like to find more information about using the Pareto tool. And Scott Watson saying seeing the Pareto tool graphed out like that's very useful and less abstract, and I agree with him there, definitely. Seeing it in this format is much easier.
Yeah, I think it's a really clear visual. You can see straight away where it is that you need to focus in on as well. So again, you know, go and read a little bit more. There's lots of examples now that we've got that people have been using them in education. And it's surprising how much improvement you get by just focusing in on the main root causes.
Catherine's also saying that it looks like a good tool and can see it being used for a lot of different things, improvement-wise.
Yep.
She also says it's great to have something to help us focus and stop the overwhelming feeling we have with the amount of improvement work we're trying to do all the time. So
yep, definitely.
I feel you, Catherine.
Definitely. Amanda, just on to the next slide then. So the other tool that we're going to share, and again, I'm aware that this is just a quick overview, but it's called a cause and effect tool, and it's often called a fishbone diagram. And this is because the diagram mirrors the shape of a fish, which we'll see on the next slide. So the first step is to really think about the effect in the system that you are looking to improve. So in our case, we'd be putting non-attendance in the head of the diagram. So the head of the fish, where that word effect is, you'd be writing in non-attendance. And then what we do is we identify key headers that can help team members' thought process. So you can choose any category headers that you like, but in education, we tend to use things like, and if we go on to the next slide, Amanda, we tend to use things like learning and teaching, there's school environment, relationships with staff, relationship with peers. You might have resources there, you might have home life, but these can be whatever you choose, and you don't need to have 6 categories. So these can be whatever you want. Then what we do is we brainstorm each of the categories. So we're thinking about what could be contributing to non-attendance within each of these categories. So for example, what about the school environment could be contributing to non-attendance? What about peer relationships? What about learning and teaching? And then we would record these on the diagram. And again, this process might also uncover that we need to find out more. So we actually don't know if any of these categories are impacting on that. So again, it can sometimes highlight that we need to find out more. So on the next slide is the beginnings of a fishbone that a school had done. So the team have brainstormed the potential causes under 6 different headings, and if you can see there, it's they went for relationships with peers, they've gone for relationships with adults in school, they've gone for learning, additional support needs, the home environment and the family. And what they've done is they've thought about under each category what could be impacting on this non-attendance. Then what we need this team to do is to start asking why. So what they would do is they would then be taking each pink post-it and asking the question, why do we think this is contributing to non-attendance? And then we would encourage teams to ask why up to 5 times for each of the pink post-its in order to get really down into the root cause of the issue. So the idea is that it allows you to see all the different causes of a problem you've identified within your system, and then it can help you to really get to the root causes of these and identify improvement areas that exist. And it's from different perspectives as well. So it's one that you would definitely do with a team. And then once you've discovered the root causes, you can then begin to generate change ideas that address them. And I know that lots of schools have used this tool effectively with pupils and with parents as well, so actually involving them in the exploration of root causes. And then just on to the last slide, Amanda, just again, realise this has been a quick introduction, but hope it's inspired you to find out more. And again, I will post the link to the QI zone where you can find out more about these tools and improvement journey at the end of the session. So I'm now going to hand over to Shona Moffat, who is a family development worker at Longhorn Primary School. And Shona followed the quality improvement journey last session as part of the Tayside RIC Improving Attendance programme. So Shona's going to share a little bit about that.
Thanks, Jan. Hi everyone, I'm Shona. I'm School and Family Development Worker at Longhorn Primary School. We have a roll of almost 300 pupils. It's a shared campus with St Francis RC Primary and also Quarryview Nursery. So we have a campus of about 750 children altogether. I primarily work with Longhorn Primary School, and my role is the link between families, home and school. In Dundee, we're really fortunate to have a school and family development worker attached to every primary school. Most schools have one dedicated to the school. Some have shared if they're a smaller school. I'm privileged that I've been at Longhorn for more than 7 years, which has been really great because it's allowed me to really get to know the families and some of the issues that they face. The majority of parents have my mobile number on their phone, and they can call and text for pretty much anything that they need, whether it's children falling out, family problems, financial difficulties, or even just playground difficulties. Can we have our next slide, Amanda, please? So our project as part of the TRIC was to improve the attendance of spotlight pupils by at least 5% over 3 months and look at the worst attendance pupils. So what we did was we focused on 15 pupils who had the lowest attendance this year, which was last term, and historically to see if we could make an improvement. We have our next slide, please, Amanda. So the tools that we used our fishbone tool to look at what the barriers were in place to see what we could tackle to improve attendance. And we decided to look at how families, sorry, I can't actually see my screen at the moment. We looked at how families' own attitudes and difficulties impacted on attendance. And we worked closely with St Francis because we did a joint TRIC project, but we did our own things slightly differently. If we could go on to the next slide, thanks. So our change ideas were really quite simple. Our first change idea was to look at minor barriers, which were a big deal for families and resulted in odd days off. Again, we focused on the 15 worst attenders, and if the child or children weren't in by 9:15, I picked up the phone. And I would just phone, because I know most of my families really well, I'd just phone and say, is everything okay? And I think because of the relationships that we have, the nature of my job, it was quite a non-threatening call. It was just checking in. And what we did was we tracked 3 of these families to gather the data. And we did that using run charts to collate the data, and that gave us indications of any shifts or trends and also any sort of astronomical data points to help us identify what was different that day. Part of the second change idea was where it transpired that they were entrenched in complex difficulties, a more targeted and coordinated approach was required. And that would be team around the child meetings or other agency support to try and help the family. And as part of the change ideas, we also promoted the importance of good attendance throughout the school through our communications with parents, using Sway, uploading daily visual timetables onto Seesaw, and really marketing the importance of good attendance and how that would improve the outcomes for our children. If we go on to the next slide, please. So what we did was we tracked 3 of our families using the run charts, and it was very clear that the calls were making a difference in attendance. So on this, and pupil C in the top right corner, when we called her mum to begin with, what she would say was she's having a meltdown this morning. She's not wanting to come into school because she wants to wear her leggings and she doesn't want to wear a skirt. And it was just a simple, well, do you know what? Let's just wear the leggings. You know, it's not a big deal. I would rather she was in school and comfortable than at home with you. So why don't we try that? And we can do a little bit of support with her in school around school uniform. And so the next time it would be a phone call and it would be, oh, she's refusing to come into school because she's already running late and she wants to bring her scooter. But if she brings her scooter in, then she'll get into trouble. She won't have anywhere to put it, won't be able to go in the bike shed. And it was things like, well, you know, I can meet her outside and we can put her scooter in my room until playtime and then we can put it outside in the bike shed at that point. But it's better that she's in school with me and learning than being at home. So these small things about small changes, being flexible and reducing the stress for parents in particular made a huge shift for that pupil. And it's at the point and you know, sort of very quickly into the process, what we found was that mum would phone me at 5 to 9 and say, she's going to be late, this is what's happening, can you help? And so we'd look to find quite simple solutions for that child so that she could get in, and her attendance really improved quite dramatically. For pupil A, the calls did make a difference and revealed that there were actually significant family issues impacting on the child. There had been a huge relationship breakup at home, and the child just wanted to stay home to look after her mum. So what we did was we had a team around the child to support the family and help them understand the impact of their own actions on their child. And what that resulted in was both parents really working together to support the child into school. So that was quite successful as well. If we could have the next slide, please. Thanks. Well, can't see it. So the conclusions are up on the screen. Making a check-in call as soon as they were absent really helped lead to improvement. It helped overcome issues to empower parents and support the child to attend school. The feedback that we got from the 15 was that these calls were helpful, and by the end of the project, a lot were calling in before they received their calls to let me know what was going on and to have a friendly chat just to see what we could do to support them. And when minor issues were resolved, parents felt more encouraged to and more empowered to help the child come into school. Go to the next slide. So the key learning from our trick journey were that these brief interventions worked for almost all families, except those who had a really long history of non-engagement. Immediate, easily resolved barriers to attendance were addressed, creating improvement. And certainly I saw that over my years of working with one child in particular. These phone calls, they would never have come into school for the whole day just because of a meltdown over leggings, but now her attendance is incredible. Relationships are key to cold calling. There needs to be a relationship with families. You need to be able to have those relationships, to be honest, for parents to be honest with you about their difficulties. And to upscale this, what we felt would be unachievable to do it for the whole school with everybody who hadn't come in by 9:15. So a targeted approach. So our plan taking this forward is to take another 20 and upscale it in that way. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shona. And it's great that you were able to share that lived experience of going through the quality improvement journey and share with us the impact that it had at Long Haul in Dundee. So folks, we have a wee bit of time. There's lots of comment in the chat. If there's anything you would like us to pick up on, or if there are any questions you have for either myself or Jan or Shona, I can see that there's lots of positive feedback about the tools. People generally always love the tools because they're such a practical support to solving problems, particularly really entrenched problems. So if you've got any specific questions about any aspect of this afternoon, there Jan has popped on the link to the Quality Improvement Zone. You'll have hours of fun roving around that and seeing some examples, other examples of how these tools have been used in education and in health. But if you've anything, folks, you want to ask us or reflect on or share with us, if you've been involved in your own improvement journey, then please share that with us. Now is an opportunity to do that now. So Mrs. Davison, a question there about their opportunities for collaborating across authorities. I'm struggling to find this despite the benefits of this type of working. There has been talk, Mrs. Davison, of a national programme around attendance because we recognise that it is nationally an issue. We are in the kind of process of planning that at the moment. The other route, I suppose, is through the RICS, and I know that some RICS, for instance, Jan and I worked with the South East on a collaborative project with 6 of the secondaries in the South East. So that might be a potential vehicle for that kind of support. But there's now quite a lot of lived experience across the country. Yeah, that's great to see. So there's maybe a potential collaboration. I don't know, Mrs. Davidson, which local authority or RIC you're working in, but there's Mrs. Farley saying, Mrs. Farley saying that that would be of interest to her too. Marek making the point about the tools being really useful. Any advice for busy schools trying to get started with some QI tools? That's one for you, Jan, I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't, it's not an easy answer because improvement does take time and we're going to have to make the time. But I think what we find is that if you follow the quality improvement approach, the time is worthwhile. So you're focusing in on the things that really need focused in, rather than maybe spending our time on symptoms of issues and not getting to the root cause. I was a head teacher before, and in the school that I worked in, we were giving staff maybe about 30 minutes a fortnight just to get together and to really start using the quality improvement approach and using the tools. And we found that 30 minutes every fortnight was enough, which doesn't sound like a lot of time. But it was enough just for people to take the time to get their head back into what it was that they were trying to do and get together as a team. But yeah, there isn't an easy answer. You just have to decide that this is really important and we're going to make the time.
Jan, I would probably add to that, being part of the TRIC, the Tayside Regional Improvement Collaborative, really made us find the time for that. So if you can join into one, I would definitely recommend it because the learning journey was really, really helpful for us.
Jan, their question about training using the quality improvement tools. So there are different routes in, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's often, so there's a skill course, which is a Scottish Improvement Leadership course for people who have maybe already dabbled a little bit in quality improvement, but it is a 9-month course, but I would highly recommend it. At the moment, our team priorities are going through a bit of change, so we're not offering any training at the moment, but yeah, I think so. But there are, on that QI zone, there are lots of modules and videos and things that you can do. There's also a SCLIP course, so it's SCLIP. And again, that's often offered and it's more about coaching teams to use QI. But at the moment, I don't have any, I couldn't direct you to training that we were offering at the moment just because we're going through a period of review. So apologies for that at the moment.
I have to say, Jan, signposted a few colleagues to the TURAS, and they've done the online training and found that really, really helpful for kind of first steps. So, you know, regardless of kind of to what depth you want to use quality improvement, I think it's a really good place to start. So I'd encourage everybody to have a wee look at that and really just to dip your toe in the water and use some of these tools and explore the journey, and to think particularly about your message about start with that understanding your system, don't jump straight into the solutions. So I mean, Shona's example was a great example of taking the time to really think about what are the barriers, and let's explore all of them, and then think really hard about what are the root causes of those. And actually something that occurred to me while you were sharing that was it's very, very easy to make assumptions in that process, and that's why having the child or the family at the centre of it is often very enlightening, because what we think as school staff are the issues quite often are not, and it's only when we involve the young person themselves or the family that we really understand the root problems. So we'd encourage you to do that as well, folks.
Amanda, just wanted as well, there is a SIPC website that's got lots of examples of improvement work. So there's posters that summarise different pieces of improvement work, but also if you were thinking about a specific piece of improvement work, I wouldn't mind people getting in touch with myself, because I probably know of a team that's already started on that journey, and it could be that we could be sharing the learning that they've already gone through with you. So I know Shona, for example, has a poster related to the piece of work that she did. So we've got lots of different improvement work that's focused on lots of different things, including attendance. So
great, and lovely to see in the chat folks already making a connection, having conversations about how can we do this together, which I think absolutely is the way forward, because you can see from the chat, from our discussion, that the themes and the issues and the barriers are not unique to each setting, that we've got some really common barriers going on across the country. So Jan, I'm sure we'll provide you with that. Mrs. Davidson, that's great. Thank you, Jan. So just a last chance, folks, if you have any other comment or question, we're really grateful for your engagement this afternoon. It always makes it much easier for the presenters if we get some feedback from folks. So that's been great. Thank you so much. So it really just remains for me to say thank you. Firstly, my thanks to Jan and Shona for presenting with me today, and many thanks to you for joining us and for your engagement. The session has been recorded and will be available online for 2 months, should you wish to refer to the slides at any point. And finally, we'd be really grateful for your feedback, and if you could use the evaluation form, which can be accessed using the QR code there, we would be really grateful of that. So thank you again. We've finished just ahead of time. It's lovely to see your feedback in the chat, and I hope that has been useful to you. And we hope that you enjoy what remains of SLF 22. And if you'd like to tweet about your session today, then please do. But Jan and Shona and I will stay online for a couple of minutes if there's anybody wants to ask us anything specifically. But thanks, folks, and great to have you with us. Thank you.